Now, when I heard this month's topic, I cringed. And I struggled for weeks. And then I went into preparing the remarks, and I found myself dealing with things that I dealt with 20 years ago, and 15 years ago, and 10 years ago, and today. And my mind was going, boo, how I've been orchestrated, how we've all been orchestrated, particularly Nina Tumpe has been orchestrated. We've been together a long time. But here's the deal. Jesus did not have a printing press, radio, TV, the internet, Zoom, or any of the communication methods that we have today. None. But yet he came with a significant message that he needed to communicate. So he used healing to create the buzz, to create the crowds, to leave the impression which has now lived on for 2,000 years. When New Thought was being birthed by Quimbley and others, it was the late 1800s. We didn't have radio, we didn't have TV, we didn't have cable, we didn't have the internet, we didn't have Zoom, we didn't have distance learning. And once again, healing was used. I'm talking physical healing now was used to create the buzz, to fill the seats, to launch the movement. Remember, this was also a time when not a lot of people had a lot of education. They were dependent on other people. I don't want to say to think for them, but they didn't have the confidence to feel like perhaps they could maintain a personal relationship with God. Also, remember where theology was, that you get to heaven by rituals and that kind of stuff. So when we fast forward to today, whether it's Christian Science, which is led by Mary Baker Eddy, that took the ultimate stand on physical healing, denying all medical science, denying all pharmacology, and in essence, having people die in agonizing pain, constantly praying to God, trying to get closer to him, because that's why they're in pain. Also, let's face it, in those early days, in fact, all the way through the Civil War, the most common medical scientific method for healing people was bleeding them. Get that bad blood out. Even Abraham Lincoln was bleeded. Also remember that it is undoubtedly true, science, medical science now, because, we're going to be talking about different science and going to use that word in different ways today. Medical science knows that at least half of illness is psychosomatic. I used to have psychosomatic colds, flu, call it whatever you want, every couple of years. And something, I one day I had a revelation, and the revelation was, I am not going to get any special love and nurture and consideration from my wife because I'm so sick. She just ain't into that. She'll tell you in a minute she ain't a nurse. And you know something? I hadn't had one of those since. So it's always pained me that New Thought still kind of hangs on and still kind of implies that if your relationship is strong enough with God, you shouldn't get sick. Which is also an implication that if you do get sick, your relationship isn't strong enough with God. And God has left no room in my being to believe any of that. For all the reasons that you already know. You know, the wonderful human being driving down the street in St. Louis, crossing an intersection and getting T-boned by a car at 80 miles an hour that is purposely playing Russian roulette with 2,000, 4,000 pounds of 70-mile-an-hour object and dies instantly. That was no negative demonstration on their faith. I read an article just a couple of weeks ago. Actually, it was a podcast, a quite long podcast. And it was talking about a particular, fortunately rare disease. And it mapped the genetic nature of this disease, and they could pretest the genes for this disease. And if you carried the right combination from the right male-female mix, you weren't going to live past 40. And everybody in that family who had it didn't live past 40. That wasn't God punishing anybody for what they did or what their ancestors did or any of that. We have examples in this church. Vicky Flothan was an angel. You had to be careful what you said around her. Because if she thought you had expressed a need, she was on it. She wasn't consulting anybody. She wasn't waiting. She was making it happen. And she loved her grandson, who was incarcerated. And she threw the doors of her house open when he got out. And a month later, like him, she had COVID and died. There wasn't anything wrong with her relationship with God. My beloved Jayasa Mama Moon McCaleb, past board member of this church, master soul if I ever saw one. I don't think anybody spent 60 seconds with Jayasa and couldn't feel the love in every cell of their body. And she wasn't happy when it was her time. I can tell you that. She and God boxed. They finally kind of reached an agreement. They kind of went, I'll go when I'm ready, but I got one more thing to do. And until I'm convinced that's done, you're just going to have to wait. She had cancer. And not because she wanted to, but because members of her family, some members of her family wanted to. She went through chemo or radiation, the whole 9 yards, and she stayed up all night with her face in a toilet bowl, puking her guts out when she didn't want to. It wasn't nothing wrong with her hookup with God. Let me tell you. She woke up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and she wrote down a question for God. And then she journaled the rest of the day. And God would answer that question. And when I, Tumpe, anyone read those journals, it was no doubt that she had to hook up. So, I researched this thing a number of different places. I'll talk about some of them. But first I want to set the stage. And then I'm going to be through with this health healing thing, physical health thing, and move on to the message God directed, provided for today. But before I do that, I want to give accolades to beloved Reverend Tia Atkins. I whispered in her ear on the way up here, let me know next time you're going to preach my sermon. Because, you know, health, healing, and whole, I think has a whole lot to do with all aspects of living. But they don't necessarily have nothing to do with physical health. Sometimes, let me tell you about my cousin, Dennis Hall. When he was a kid, he spent his life in a body cast, literally. He finally got up and around, you know, he played a little basketball, thought he could do something. And then it was discovered why he was having so much problem staying vertical in life. He had multiple sclerosis. He got married on a cane. The next day, he hit a wheelchair, and he never rose out of that wheelchair again. He had strong faith, a strong relationship with God. He had a woman who didn't know he had multiple sclerosis, who stood by him for another 20 years as he outlived 3 lifespans. And we used to jump in the car and roll out there to see Dennis, to cheer him up. It's like, give me a break. We left soaring. Our spirits were. And at his funeral, person after person after person after person after person said the same thing. They said, he inspired me to be a better person. And Dennis Hall said, yeah, well, you ever heard Dennis Hall complain? And nobody ever will. That man came to inspire others. He chose that illness so that we could know more health. So I encourage all of us in New Thought, in Christendom, et cetera, because Jesus and apostles, because the founders of Divine Service, science found it easy and comfortable to use medical healing to gain attention. That's no longer necessary. We do have radio now. We do have TV now. We do have video now. We do have the internet now. We do have Zoom now. We do have distance learning now. And we have people who can think for themselves. So let me share this. This is by Reverend Dr. Darrell Watkins, who's the senior minister of Sunshine Chapel in Florida and is the current, has rotated into the current leadership of the Divine Science Federation. Not denomination, not hierarchy, an association, a federation. What I love about New Thought in general, you've heard this before, and Divine Science in particular, is that it is investigative and experiential. New Thought spiritually is non-dogmatic. We aren't asked to believe what we can't or to recite creeds from antiquity that did not reflect the cosmology or science of our day. We aren't asked to accept things uncritically, nor are we asked to embrace any belief out of fear. On the contrary, we are encouraged to contemplate the omnipresence that God is and to find hope, courage, joy, and peace in that reality. We deny that fear has any power over us, and we affirm that blessings are ours by right of consciousness. We give thanks for all the good we've experienced, and even for the good that has not yet shown up, but that exists in the realm of endless possibility. And so, as divine scientists, we have explored the power of mind, the truth of love, and the benefits of realizing our unity with God. We have our lived experiences. Within that, you can think, I have my very own lived experiences of healing, insights, breakthroughs, and joy. And having demonstrated those blessings, you want to test New Thought? Just try New Thought. If it doesn't work, fine. If it works, maybe you're onto something. These blessings, ours is a trustworthy witness. Okay, I thought I knew what I was doing. And man, I was rocking and rolling in that research like I told you, and I was finding all kinds of things, and they were all kind of sort of tying in together, but it was something that was bugging me. And I just couldn't get myself to deliver that message in that way, but guess what? I wasn't supposed to. I wasn't supposed to. Because in my difficulty, before I laid down my head, I asked God and the ancestors to help me with this message. Like, come on, I need some help here. And when I got up the next morning and did a little meditation and refreshing the connection with them, and I went and turned on my computer, I'm like, what the heck is that? That wasn't on my computer when I went to bed. And it was like, you know, all these, and this name just kind of came off the page at me. And I said, who is that? And it was one of the most famous leaders of this particular Divine Science Church. First Church of Divine Science in St. Louis, Missouri. And suddenly, a whole nother presentation was presented to me to present to you. But let me tell you what I threw out. It also drives me crazy that people pull verses out the Bible to validate things. It bothers me that sometimes even I will choose a verse that I know has a meaning that connects in people's minds, and I don't think that's appropriate, because so many times that historical learning, that automatic connection is really designed to stop all debate, all analysis, and, like total line. This is Christianity. You ain't supposed to think. Blind faith is the test of faith. So I have problems with that. I also have problems with all the things that I have learned. For instance, this book is probably 20 years old. I love it. It's about the Jesus seminar. 60 of the world's preeminent Bible scholars. And what they did is they analyzed every single word supposedly said or attributed directly to Jesus Christ, with commentary, with analysis, right through the Gospels, the 5 Gospels, not 4. And they voted on what is the probability that Jesus said this. And if 75% or more said, yeah, Jesus said that, it got red. And if 50% or more said, he didn't say that, but it was something that was consistent with his belief system, it got pink. And if they said, that don't sound like Jesus at all, they say gray, and my book is purple. and if they're like, give me a break, Jesus ain't say none of that, it was black. Okay? And in the back, they list those times that Jesus is quoted in order by the percentage ranking. You know how many said, yeah, Jesus said this. And I'm looking at red, okay? And red ain't even a half a page, okay? And immediately we get into pink. And pink is a full page. And then we get to all this other stuff that they are absolutely convinced Jesus didn't say. He was being misquoted. So I maintain, and I've always maintained, if you haven't read the Bible at least 2-3 times using a good Bible study guide, a good concordance, you shouldn't have an opinion and you shouldn't quote a verse because you don't know the major themes, nor do you know all the contradictory statements that people throw around like it's gospel and stop all conversation with it. Okay. Here's another thing that I spent time struggling with. My wife and I got invited to one of these elite weekends, where the movers and shakers of the world come together and they give each other seminars. And we were there on Kiowa Island was the location this time, the one we went to. And there was a track on Christianity. And there was one seminar that I was like dying to get to. It was called, What is the Future of Christianity? And you wouldn't believe the names. I'm not going to tell you who they are, but they are the most easily recognizable, highly respected names in all of Christendom, or their sons. Actually, there weren't any daughters there, which is interesting. And I sat there for 90 minutes with just explosions going off in my brain. And at the end of the question and answer series, I raised my hand and I said, I came here really excited. I respect you guys, and I wanted to see what is your vision for the future of Christianity. And what I heard is you spend 90 minutes without exception questioning whether Christianity deserved to exist in the future given its history in the past. I said, oh my God. And then over the next 6 years, I realized they spoke truth. My boy Bart's a bad dude. He's one of the most highly respected theologians in America alive today. He did Jesus Interrupted. He did Misquoting Jesus. And Bart drills down on the major themes of Christ in the Bible. And he says, oh, we got a lot of them wrong, wrong, wrong. And starting at the top is Jesus nor John the Baptist were into repentance. Repent, for the kingdom of God is at hand, was a misinterpretation from the Greek to the Latin. It followed into the English. That wasn't what he was saying at all. The Latin word is metanoia. Metanoia. Metanoia was what they were speaking, not repent. God created us. He knows. He loves us. We can't disappoint him. Here's what metanoia means. And I don't want to read it all to you. Let me see if I can find what I wanted to share. I guess it starts here. Though the word metanoia in the Greek literally means a change of mind, this is more than a logical, I see your point, or a whimsical, I guess, I'll do something else instead. No, there's something deeper about it. This change of mind indicates an opening of the understanding that leads to transformation. Melanoma was the great harbinger word of the gospel, bearing witness to the light. Here's a serious Greek scholar. The holy herald of Christ, John the Baptist, and Christ himself, the finisher of prophecy, made proclamation unlike the same mysterious summons as a baptism or a rite of initiation, namely, melatona. Henceforth, transfigure your theory of moral truth. The old theory is laid aside as infinitely insufficient. A new and spiritual revelation is established. Metanoia. Contemplate moral truth as radiating from a new center, apprehended under transfigured relations. And doesn't it make sense that this would be the introduction of the new era? We are showing you a new thing. A new kingdom is entering. Open your eyes. Allow your thinking to be transformed and see. This is metanoia. For 3 years, our Lord Jesus made good on his proclamation, command of metanoia. He taught in a completely new way. All who heard were astonished. He spoke in parables. He used his miracles as metaphors. He used nature as object lessons. He spoke sometimes in dark statements, sometimes in plain language. But he was always teaching, always leading those with the ears to hear to the truth proclaimed by his metanoia. The Lord Jesus Christ is the beginning and ending of this new era. Not the ending, but the beginning of this new era. So this whole sin, born evil in nature, God's still angry over Adam biting an apple. So work hard, try to follow the 10 Commandments, do what we tell you, believe what we tell you, and you'll probably still go to hell, and God will punish you with fire and brimstone for all eternity. Come on, folk. Don't let me say it. But I didn't go they didn't let me go that route. I didn't want to really go that route because I felt like I'd be trashing the Bible. And I'm not trashing the Bible. The Bible is a fabulous book, but it has to be interpreted. And it has to be addressed from a holistic understanding of 66 different books, 40 different authors, none of them written within the first 30, 40 years past Jesus' death, won't no printing presses. Each book was written to a specific audience for a specific purpose to try to sell a specific thing. And guess what? God didn't stop talking to people 2,000 years ago. He's still talking to people. And we can still listen. Okay. Also, I ended up on this. Greg knows what this is. This is an amazing document. It's been done by Unity, and it tracks the thinking from the dawn of time to the new thought groupings of today. eventually, near the end of this morning's wrap-up, I went here. This is the history of this church. We'll talk about this later. But before we leave healing, wholeness, and Reverend Tia, I went to the most definitive sources in terms of New Thought that I'm aware of. One is I guess you would call it now certainly the preeminent New Thought seminary. And the other one is a document prepared to answer questions from media and other about what divine science believes. I just want to read you a couple paragraphs. In Divine Science's Principles of Faith, the 14th definition is healing, a process in individual unfoldment, a change from a belief in inharmony to a realization of wholeness and divine harmony. That's it. Nothing about physical health. This one is from, I got the title covered, Divine Science Questions and Answers. Do divine scientists believe in sin, sickness, and death? Divine scientists believe that sin is the result of ignorance of the truth. The word sin, from its early Greek meaning in archery, merely meant a missing of the mark. In other words, we sin, we miss the mark when we fail to attain our highest calling, which is the realization of our Christ nature. You've heard Reverend Dr. Neonat Tumpe say that dozens of times. Sickness, listen now, is a lack of full realization of what we are, i.e. spiritual beings. Doctors today are increasingly aware that many physical manifestations of illness are psychosomatic, or expressions of an inner attitude. Divine scientists have found that when an individual is expressing on a high level of consciousness and knows completely that God is omnipresent, that harmony with the one creative power, God, results in perfection. Not perfection by our I don't ever want to get sick thing, or God's supposed to keep me well thing. But perfection is little pieces of God who can use illness for powerful and appropriate reasons. I won't even deal with death. You know that. There is no death. We merge back with our Creator. And then those that you know me know that I like God according to Neil Donald Walsh. We've been out there a couple of times and do workshops with him in Oregon. So I went through what Neil had to say. And here's what Neil had to say. Neil had to say what Reverend Tia had to say, not today, which was deeper even than what she said the week before, but basically she said, healing relates to every aspect of your life, not just physical well-being. And that's what Neil said. But Neil went beyond that. Neil said, look, y'all struggling with whether I want you to be sick or not. How about you taking the actions you need not to be sick? He said, you know, you're smoking cigarettes, you're obese, you're down in sugar, you're eating processed foods. You don't go, he said this. God, according to Neil Donald Walsh, said, you don't go to your doggone doctor's appointments. You don't take, he said it, your pharmacology, which could help you. And then you want to act like I'm making you sick. Okay? But before they let me go on this one, they sent me to this one little place. And when I go like this, that's Neil, and then the answer is God. Neil says, would you say that again, please? And God says, of course. Whatever you choose for yourself, give to another. If you choose to be happy, cause another to be happy. If you choose to be prosperous, cause another to prosper. If you choose more love in your life, and prosper doesn't necessarily just mean cash or at all. If you choose more love in your life, cause another to have more love in theirs. Do this sincerely, not because you seek personal gain, but because you really want the other person to have that, and all the things you give away will come to you. Neil says, Why is that so? How does that work? And God says, the very act of your giving something away causes you to experience that you have it to give away. Since you cannot give to another something you do not now have, your mind comes to a new conclusion. Comes to a new conclusion. Listen to this. And he has capitalized the N in new and the T in thought. A new thought about you. Namely, that you must have this, or you could not be giving it away. This, capitalized again, new thought then becomes your experience. You start being that. And once you start being a thing, you've engaged the gears of the most powerful creation machine in the universe, your divine self, capitalized. Whatever you are being, you are creating. The circle is complete. And you will create more and more of that in your life. It will be made manifest in your physical experience. This is the greatest secret of life, according to God, according to Neil Donald Walsh. This is the greatest secret of life. It is what I've written books about. God wrote the books through Neil. It was all there in far greater detail. I'm through with healing. Here's what happened. When I got up and I looked at the screen, I saw a name, Dr. Robert Walterhalter. Dr. Robert Walterhalter was a really well-known divine science leader who led this church for, 20, 30 years. And he was considered the preeminent divine science scholar of his era. So on July 25th, 2002, at the International New Thought Alliance Congress in Norfolk, Virginia, he was the keynote speaker. And the title of his talk was The Significance of Quimbley for Our Times. Now, you're wondering, who is Quimbley, okay? Quimbley is recognized as the harbinger of new thought. In other words, in this path of understanding, you got Jesus, and under Jesus, you have Phineas P. Quimbley, who lived from 1802 to 1866. So he died at the end of the Civil War. And Julius Dresser and Horatio Dresser were students of his, as was Mary Betty Eddy, who created divine science. They taught Emma Curtis Hopkins, who is considered the mother of New Thought and the teacher of teachers, who taught Caddy and the Fillmores and Brooks and Kramer, who started divine science, Ernest Holmes, who did United Church of Religious Science and Religious Science International, Emmett Fox. He's the start of it all. I'm probably in trouble on time, so I'm going to try to skip some parts, but here's what he said. The significance, and this has been edited, by the way, in terms of size. Very few words have been changed, just a few transitions. The significance of Quimbley, whose 200th birth we celebrate today, is that he struck at the root of evil of dis-ease, lack, limitation, and alienation from God. In his own practice, he found a realization of the divine presence as life, love, and wisdom. The New Thought movement, together with its constituent parts, is but the living core of an immense movement of spiritual consciousness that is infiltrating into all walks of life and segments of society. In the current situation, the central message of New Thought can infiltrate, that's a good infiltrate, by the way, with minimum opposition, where it is most needed in the lives of individuals, families, businesses, churches, communities, and nations. I skipped an important paragraph. This is Winterhalter talking about why New Thought was a well-kept secret. He said, in some respects, it would be better for New Thought if New Thought were more widely known as such, which would bring many of us fame and fortune. In another sense, however, there is great value in not giving our potential opponents too large a target. They were afraid to scream New Thought from the mountaintops. And they weren't burning people at the stake anymore, but they were ruining their lives. There is one aspect of the Quimbley writings that has been inadequately emphasized. That is the depth of his own commitment to the vision of the United States as articulated by the founding fathers of 1776. Now, as a black man, I started freaking out after that, okay? Listen to this. Quimbley, back in early 1800s, he affirmed racial and gender equality in stark terms that a historian would not expect to find in the mid-19th century. I want to say that again, but I won't. He understood the depth behind the affirmations in the Declaration of Independence that all men were created equal, including both sexes, as Quimbley interpreted it in the early 1800s, and that they are endowed by the Creator with certain inalienable rights, including life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Check this out. Quimbley was a foe of landed aristocracy. Today, think the mega wealthy who control God's creation literally. The forests, the trees, the land, the minerals. This included was not limited to the slaveholders who held blacks in bondage in the American South. He was an open opponent of slavery. In a larger sense, he and his writings provide a vital historical link. This linkage demonstrates the kinship, listen to this, between early New Thought on the one hand and the ferment of spiritual consciousness underlying democratic movements in many nations in the mid-19th century. This needs to be understood not only with reference to Quimbley himself, but also as background for Emma Curtis Hopkins, one of the founders of the Divine Science, worked in the 1880s and 1890s, including her efforts to make it legal for women to vote and to promote other civic and social reforms. Having given this general picture, which because of scheduling constraints must be kept succinct, this is Winterhalter. We will now move on to specific references from Quimbley writings to further document the depth of his spiritual consciousness. This is still Winterhalter called talking. Having covered some of the Quimbley material last year with respect to Matthew, Mark, and Luke, I will now move on to how he viewed the material in the Gospel of John. This is fully appropriate. Throughout the history of New Thought, when teachers and students have examined the Bible, interest is centered on the Gospel of John. Once it was seen that the Word, the Christ, in its inmost reality is our being and does not apply to Jesus only, the entire Gospel of John is seen in a new light. Quimbley himself affirms that Christ is the God in us all. Now, I have many pages of his speech dealing with the root theology of divine science, but I'm going to skip all of that and pretend that that was the end of his speech and go into my closing comments. Now, closing thoughts on a declaration. Within divine science, the Center for Divine Love is known as and referred to as First Church, for apparently it was the very first divine science church. Its original leader, Dr. Herman Schroeder, knew truth when he was exposed to it, ran with it, and was part of the founding leadership of divine science. Dr. Winterhalter, also an honored past leader for the Center of Divine Love and the author of the speech. Schrader was the founding minister. Walter Halter, I quoted. Excerpts from which I just shared was clearly a thought leader and impermanent science scholar of his time. Now today, we assembled black folk who who somehow inherited this historical place and thought movement unknowingly, yet clearly prepared our entire lives for this moment in time, has stepped into a line of new thought leadership flowing back to its source. I've said 150 times, I believe we're here for a reason. We've been assembled to carry an important message, not just to African Americans, but to others. And with the new tools of divine streaming, the internet, social media, and email marketing are now willing to now boldly face any opposition, daring anyone to bring it on, for we know that we are here for a purpose. To be a visible and viable alternative to the mean and angry God theology, while firmly debunking slave theology, thus becoming the catalyst for the healing of the African American community and the catalyst for racial reconciliation in America. Hey, somebody's got to do it, so why not you? Therefore, under the teachings of Jesus, Phineas Parkhurst Quimbley, Emma Curtis Hopkins, Nona Brooks, Dr. Herman Schroeder, and Dr. Walter Winterhauser, and under the banner of New Thought and Divine Science, last week, the board of directors of the Center for Divine Love dipped into its emergency cookie jar and formally approved and allocated a budget of $75,000 that will be combined with the $120,000 Google advertising allowance in order to implement the CDL board-approved Internet Marketing Strategic Expansion Plan to aggressively deliver for God what we perceive God has asked us to do to become a visible and viable alternative to mean and angry God by spreading the God of love theology as New Thought. To be accomplished by Reverend Dr. Nina Tumpe, Sister Khadijah Mahdi, Reverend Tia Atkins, Asar Gregory Stanton, Minister of Music, Cheryl Brown, Piano Maestro, Peter Williams, Video leader, Lucretia Levy and her team, Ishmael Tumpe, Craig Ali Arnold, Bria Christmas, Cheryl Rogers, Falame Fitzgerald, and I believe that John Christmas will be welcomed back to this team soon. And among others, Tierra Norris, Marble Davis, Nakia Horde, Vicki Mathis Denson, Reverend Dr. Howard Denson, and you. Amen. And so let it be, and so it is.
Everything must change. Nothing stays the same. Everyone will change. No one stays the same. The young become the old, and mysteries do unfold. For that's the way of time. Nothing and no one goes unchanged. except rain comes from the clouds, sun lights up the sky, and hummingbirds do fly. Winter turns to spring, and a wounded heart will heal, but never much too soon, as everything must change. There are not many things in life you can be sure of, except rain comes from the clouds, sun lights up the sky, and hummingbirds do fly. Oh, rain comes from the clouds, sun lights up the sky, and hummingbirds, rain comes from the clouds, sun lights up the sky, and music makes me cry. Everything must change.
Amen. Beautiful, beautiful. Miss Cheryl Brown and Peter Williams. That was wonderful, Cheryl. Wonderful. We here at the Center for Divine Love invite you again to come out and listen to not only the words that were spoken today, but the beautiful sounds of Miss Cheryl Brown, our music director, and the world-renowned Peter Williams. We got the best down here. I mean, you know, all over. Our praise team with Jeremiah Allen. We have Sam Huddleston. We have Jeremy. What's Jeremy's last name? Jeremy Taylor. I mean, we've just pulled people from all over, the best of St. Louis. And now we can say even the best of East St. Louis, because I believe Jeremy is from East St. Louis. The best speakers here, Reverend Dr. Howard Denson, that just gave a wonderful word and explained why we are New Thought here, all the way from the beginning, that the beginning fathers and mothers fought against racial bias, and how we stand here and we're saying that, you know, she just said everything must change. Your mind must change. You must become a new creature. You got to become a new creature. You got to think differently. And that is what we're talking about here at the Center for Divine Love. So if you want to be part of us, we're asking that, first of all, you become a member here. You can do it online. You can go to www.centerfordivinelove.org or on Facebook. We ask that you just say, hey, I want to be part of this movement. This is a wonderful movement for our future. Also, if you would like to give, we ask that you go to, again, centerfordivinelove.org, scroll down to the bottom, and you can give your donations. You can send it to 3617 Wyoming, as we continue to bring this new word, as we continue to bring you this empowering lessons that we have for you every Sunday here at 11 o'clock at the Center for Divine Love. Thank you. Until next week, we say, God bless you.